So Lily Ray, Nicole Scott, thanks for joining us here at SISTRIX, where we're going to talk about trend content. And I don't mean fashion, as in trendy clothes. I mean content that's rising in popularity and falling in popularity. You are an SEO content director. You are a content director that we have talked about the SEO part, and you don't do so much of that, yeah? But we'll get back into that in a few minutes. We want to go into what are trends. Is it monetizable? Is it worthwhile doing? Is it hard? How do you do it? And then we'll summarize a bit later everything. But first, let's go through what is a trend. Nicole, what's a trend to you? You've done a lot of work over the last 15 years with your websites, working on what I would call trend content. What does it mean to you, trend content?
For me, it's a topic, maybe an item or a thought or a product that is going to gain popularity over time, right? So it's something that isn't, like for me, a trend isn't a flash in the pan. It's something that is long-term and something that we're going to be seeing for a few years.
Yeah. And you've been doing that on how many websites? You've had 3 exits of websites?
I've had 2 exits of websites, but it was 4 websites total, but 2 brands.
Right.
Yeah.
So we can say you're a successful trend content director, producer.
Yeah. So my first website was called Netbook News, which is 100% a trend website.
Yeah, I remember it.
Yeah.
Let's go to the SEO's view of trend. I think we'll get a few different differences of opinion here on the sofa. Lily, what's your definition of a trend from the sort of SEO content producer's perspective?
Yeah, so a trend is something that we identify as worth producing content about because of the nature of how much people are searching for it over time. So if we notice through our tools that something's really picking up a lot of momentum in terms of how people search and people's search behavior, that might be a trend worth producing content about. So it might be, again, like a topic or an entity or an event or something where we notice there's enough people picking up, the tools are picking up enough data that indicates that people are interested in this topic, that it warrants having a content strategy behind it.
Yeah. Do you propose trends to your customers, your clients, or do they come with what they perceive as a trend to you?
It happens both ways. If the client pitches us a trend, we'll use tools to kind of take a look at what it looks like from a data perspective. But in many cases, we have kind of an established set of entities or topics that we focus on with that client, and we'll pay attention to the trends on those topics.
Right. So there's enough data out there for you on even these emerging topics?
Emerging topics can be hard because sometimes it happens so quickly that the tools might not pick up on it very well, but there's a suite of tools and technology that we use nowadays to indicate like we're seeing a really rapid uptick in volume or demand for a certain topic. So that will be a good indication to us that we should produce content.
Yeah. Nicole, I think you come into the trend process a little bit earlier than that because you're someone that goes to press events. You go to exhibitions and tries to identify trends that way.
Yeah, from the expert perspective, I guess.
Yeah, how do you do that? How do you spot what's going to be a trend, or is it just a matter of taking a risk?
Well, so it's about really understanding my niche, right? And it is a niche. So with my previous websites, it's been around consumer electronics, specifically like netbook or laptop mobility or smartphone mobility, which has since become a very mainstream, topic of coverage, right? Yeah. Product reviews, right? Whereas 15 years ago, this was still quite a niche endeavor. So I'm definitely not the best example because I've been doing it for so long, right? The ecosystem has changed, right? And I've been changing with it, right? So you have to continually evolve with the way that the internet is evolving. Yeah. So for me, it's about looking at the technology, and I've definitely made wrong bets.
I was going to ask you, are there trends that you've had to drop along the way that you thought were trends? Can you give any examples?
Well, this is something I shouldn't admit, but I didn't think the iPhone was going to take off.
Well, the first iPhone didn't have data and no app store. So
exactly.
It was an iPod.
I was like, why would people use this? Yeah. But the second generation, I was back on board. But if you dig further enough on the internet, I think there is footage of me saying, "Oh, the first iPhone." It's not so. not so hot.
You're doing the data journalism for our TrendWatch series on SISTRIX, sistrix.com/trend. You've got a trend with you down there to your right. What is that, and why is that a trend?
This is Squishmallow. Would you like to?
Thanks. This is my first time.
This is good. So for anyone watching, this is like the trend that they need to be watching.
Yeah, it's pretty nice.
It's really nice.
And this obviously came out like the data that we gave to you. Have you done the backstory on that, or I think you're writing on it for the next issue?
I'm writing on it for the next issue because I needed to meet him in person in order to have like authentic journalism and to really
get the publicity shot ready for it, don't we? Before you do your.
But Squishmallow actually came from a bunch of different trends, right? That I'd seen from previous trend reports. So he's kind of the culmination of several things on the internet coming together, which is always quite cool. So I mean, there was the Axolotl, which was a big Minecraft trend, but also a Squishmallow trend. So there's a few things on the internet that kind of, I think, other than like school kid popularity, sort of led to a search, like an overall search trend for this fella.
Yeah. I think a lot of people will be interested in monetization of trend data. How do we do it? Is it possible? Is it hard? How do you do it?
Yeah, for SEO, I think it's all about timing and identifying the trends that are on brand for your domain or for the people that produce content for you, because if the search engines have recognized that you're an authority or you have expertise in a certain area, they're going to look to you to produce content on those topics. So in those cases, you would kind of want to be at the forefront of topics that are trending and identify something, again, right at that sweet spot of when it's gaining momentum, because with SEO, it's really all about timing for certain topics. Like if you become, especially if you're the entity that can break the news, that's really going to get you a ton of visibility and traffic and links and everything. But if you're a little bit late to the curve, it's going to be really difficult because probably a lot of competitors have already written about it and might kind of be saturated in that sense. But so it's really about knowing your expertise and developing the content at the exact right moment.
Sounds like a tough job, but can anyone jump in on a trend and start having, getting success, even short-term success in Google search, for example?
It's very difficult nowadays. I think it's becoming increasingly difficult. You have to have kind of an assigned authoritativeness or perceived what we call EAT, expertise, authority, and trust on a given topic for Google to say, we know that this content producer tends to talk about these topics and they have a lot of authority to be able to publish on those topics. So not anybody can go out there and expect a lot of traffic from a trend, especially when those trends get into what we call your money, your life. So things that deal with financial topics or health or politics, where Google and search engines are very focused on high quality content and trustworthy content. It's much more difficult nowadays to just be any new blogger that writes about these topics and expect a lot of performance from that.
I'll come back to the topic of sort of like author expertise in a minute, but what's your opinion on monetization of it? Is it difficult? Do you have to be an expert? Can you jump in on a trend and make money out of it? With content, of course. Sorry, not with the product itself.
I mean, of course, affiliate marketing is one definite way to go. But for me, I feel that it is monetizable, but maybe not the content itself, right? So for me, in the way that I do business, it's useful for me to produce high quality, trusted content because most of the websites, or a big number of the websites today, aren't focused on high quality content. They're focused on SEO content, right? Content that just will perform well, right? And to me, a lot of what's happening online right now is quite cookie cutter, right? Like everyone's writing to a specific formula, right? So I'm trying to stand out by having, high quality researched content that I'm passionate about. And I know that it's not SEO focused, but at least it's getting me the proper awareness with companies that I would like to work with, and I guess like personal branding and reputation.
There's two things I want to pick up on: the passionate aspect of it, and the cookie cutter thing as well. And I want to turn to you and say, does that work? Does cookie cutter obviously work? Let's say not cookie cutter. Let's say writing to the standards that are required for Google to pick stuff up. And passion, does that is there enough scope in the way you write SEO content to include passion and that spur of the moment type stuff that you want to write? Is there scope for that in the SEO type?
So I think Google in particular has launched 2 updates in the US last year, late 2021, called the product review updates, where they're actually looking for individual expertise and enthusiasm and proof that you've spent time with the product and you're actually an expert in the product, for example, when it comes to product reviews. But I think it's something that, many sites are reverse engineering what has worked in the SEO space and creating content accordingly, which is where that kind of cookie cutter thing comes from. But I think that search engines are now focusing a lot more on like evidence that the content producer has actually spent time with the product and actually invested a lot of time into doing the research and comparing products and everything. So it's something that's hard to solve for algorithmically, but it is becoming increasingly a focal point for the search engines. But yeah, it's when it comes to like enthusiasm and passion, you have to do that within the guardrails of, if you're focusing on SEO traffic, it has to be structured in a way that matches how people search for things. But there are other products out there in the organic search space like Google Discover and YouTube and Google News where there might be a little bit more room to have some of that like enthusiasm or personal branding and how you write.
Do you find that frustrating, having to have these standards when you're trying to write from the heart? Do you find that frustrating?
It's like a kick in the teeth.
It's a little frustrating.
Right in the face.
I like the fact that we've got, 2 differing opinions on how to write content here, and we've had, both of you are successful in both areas, so it's good to know. Let's go back to the idea of an expert in a trend. Now, trends aren't forever. How does an expert then carry this expertise? Can they carry it forward to the next trend? Is Google going to pick up on that author? Are they going to understand the author when they start writing about a new trend?
I think if it's within the wheelhouse of what they tend to publish on, then yes. So if they're someone that Google perceives as a technology expert, there's kind of a wide gamut of topics and trends that they might be able to do well for. But if they publish a recent trend in cooking, Google doesn't trust them as much to write about breaking trends in cooking or whatever the other topic is. Yeah. So I think that you kind of have to stay within your wheelhouse, but there's a pretty wide range. I don't think that it's like it always has to be the exact same thing that you write about. It's just your demonstrated field of expertise.
Now, how does Google deal with influencers, right? Because like right now, influencers are taking up a lot of the budget that journalism used to get, right? And influencers believe that they're doing journalism because they're saying my honest opinion, right? When we all know, I know that that's not journalism. Many people don't know that that's not. And so this is a problem for me when I search for content because like I don't want an influencer's opinion because they're not actually an expert, right? How does Google differentiate with that? Because a lot of influencer content is quite prolific.
I think influencer content tends to do better on social channels. Like they would have to invest some component of like focusing on SEO for it to do well. Like Google's not going to rank content because an influencer wrote it if it's not the best content. Google's a lot more focused on the actual content quality. So I think there's a way, and there's many examples of influencers that do well on the SEO side, but I mean, I've worked with them. You have to take the content and take their expertise and their opinions and everything and structure it in a way that's good for SEO. But being the influencer is not in and of itself something that's going to make your content do well on Google search. Whereas something like, Facebook or Instagram, it might be a different story.
Okay.
Let's cross over to the topic of links now, because it's a very important aspect of SEO. It's talked about a lot. There's a lot of money in link building business. And we were talking before we sat down on the fact that you didn't do a lot of active link building. But do you have a link profile? Were you able to build links?
The website is very healthy. Yeah, like all of my websites have been very, very healthy, but we built it on breaking news, right? Breaking news and being the first to do product reviews, right? Like the website was based in Asia, so we had first access to a lot of stuff, right? So like being like at the source sort of gave us a competitive advantage. And through this type of like very fundamental like blogging and journalism, like were we able to create like content that people wanted to link to. Like later, like when I moved to Evergreen, which I found more rewarding, the websites got less links, but we got them in the early days, right? So like the content evolution for us worked, but like breaking news today versus breaking news 10 years ago is a totally different game.
So success without link building, but link building in what sounds like an organic way, right?
Yeah.
Would you agree? Or is there another way to do it?
There's plenty of ways to do it, but the way you're describing is the way that I think search engines want it to be done, because that's the authentic way that content is shared and appreciated, and that's how they want. The role of links in SEO should be one that's organic and authentic because the content is actually good. But if you're producing really fantastic content and nobody's seeing it, that's another problem. So there's usually some level of promotion that needs to be done, or PR or outreach, just to make sure that your content's getting in front of the right people. But that can be done ethically. And that's just basically, I have this really great piece of evergreen content. I want to make sure that people see it. But, it's not like a financial exchange or anything like that.
So like those 20 or 30 website or emails I would get a week asking for paid links on my website. Not that way.
The guidelines, yeah. Ideally not that way. That's playing with fire, but
Not that way.
Yeah.
Okay, exiting a trend. Now, you've had 2 exits.
Yeah.
How did you know when to exit?
The first one, Intel killed the netbook. So that was kind of the end of netbook news. But it was following the trend, right, and the technology behind it, right? So like, because I knew that Intel was no longer going to be providing that platform, then I knew that we had to evolve to a new domain. And then the exit from that domain was more actually just about my frustration with journalism, right? And like the direction that it was going. And
so it was a personal choice.
It was definitely a personal choice for me to want to exit that. So like now I work with Bloomberg, who has very high ethical standards. And I'm, you know what I mean? Like for me, like it's very much about like having really good engaged content that's meaningful, right? And that to me is the most important thing. And for a lot of websites, my competition, I felt that it was more of an SEO battle, are you building the product reviews in the right way? Are you doing this? Have you cleaned that? Are you taking care of your bat? I was like, oh God, all of these
tiring,
things
yeah.
that I just don't like. I just want to make good content. I don't want to do all this other stuff.
But at the root of all this is expertise, authority, and trust, right? I mean, it links you to, and that's the underlying common factor here. The common denominator is this expertise, the desire to do it. Of course, you can't do it without a desire or an interest in the product area you're talking about. Google will learn to carry your expertise through, possibly to another domain. I suppose you need to do some redirecting of one domain to another to get some link equity across. But if you're exiting by selling, then that's not possible. So, to summarize, it's a thing. It's possible. It needs expertise. Is it worth trying? Is it worth doing, or is it just too much hard work?
Which part?
Yeah.
The whole lot.
Lot.
Is that the nature of the beast? It is hard work to make anything work, even if it's not a trend.
I think if you're paying attention to the data to support what you're doing and what's working and what's not working, and you can figure out a process that works, then it can work really well. But that involves a pretty significant level of data analysis that is not always available to many experts and journalists and authors, because that's kind of where the SEO comes in, right? Or the data analysis component, because you can't just shoot in the dark and hope for things to work anymore. It's just too much competition. So I think if you're using the data that's available to you, both in terms of trend data as well as what has performed for you and what are the topics where you do demonstrate expertise, I think doubling down in those areas can be very effective.
And you've exited. Would you consider going back into this sort of, trend journalism, trend content creation?
I mean, it's very fresh. Like what? I'm only 3 weeks out, so
Right.
the answer is
not the right time to ask.
Yeah, the answer is no. I'm quite enjoying my freedom, but at the same time, I'm also realizing that the internet of today requires a new level of attention to data, right? And attention to how you look at information on the internet, right? And I think that we all just have to become more savvy in general about how we consume on the internet, because there's so much crap on the internet. So I think it's twofold. Just like as a normal human, my understanding of data has to increase, and as someone who makes content for that beast, I have to accept that data analysis is something just that I have to do.
Yeah. Nicole, thanks. You've got the next TrendWatch coming out at the beginning of March, and the Squishmallow will be in there. You'll have 9 other topics. Yeah.
Yep.
We've got someone writing the TrendWatch in Germany as well. Lily, you're going to be doing, I think, an index watch for us, US soon, or maybe at the end of the first half.
Whenever an algorithm update happens.
Whenever an algorithm update happens, you're always
see.
on the data. Thank you both for joining us here at SISTRIX to talk about trends. Thank you.
Thank you.